Suella Braverman has written a scathing and really quite personal letter to the Prime Minister as a result of being sacked yesterday, and it's very bitter. I'm going to read the second part of it. As you know, I accepted your offer to serve as Home Secretary in October 2022 on certain conditions. One of those conditions, of course, was that only a few days earlier she'd resigned because of, quote, a technical breach of the ministerial rules. Despite you having been rejected by a majority of party members during the summer leadership contest, and thus having no personal mandate to be Prime Minister, I agreed to support you because of the firm assurances you gave me on key policy principles. These were, among other things, reduce overall legal migration as set out in the 2019 manifesto through inter alia, reforming the international students' route and increasing salary thresholds on work visas. So despite the pseudo legal expression inter alia, she doesn't really know about apostrophes. There should be an apostrophe after students. 2. Include specific, quote, notwithstanding clauses, quote, into new legislation to stop the boats, comma, i.e., exclude the operation of the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR, Human Rights Act, HRA, and other international law that had thus far obstructed progress on this issue. Again, an example of somebody who sees a problem and sees only one solution. And I can't imagine that Rishi Sunak agreed to that, by the way. 3. Deliver the Northern Ireland Protocol and retained EU law bills in their then existing form and timetable. I don't think that was her job. I think that was the job of Chris Heaton-Harris, and he did it. She managed very little. 4. Issue unequivocal statutory guidance to schools that protects biological sex, safeguards single-sex spaces, and empowers parents to know what is being taught to their children. This was a document with clear terms to which you agreed in October 2022 during your second leadership campaign. I trusted you. It is generally agreed that my support was a pivotal factor in winning the leadership contest and thus enabling you to become Prime Minister. For a year as Home Secretary, I've sent numerous letters to you on the key subjects contained in our agreement, made requests to discuss them with you and your team, and put forward proposals on how we might deliver these goals. I worked up the legal advice, policy detail, and action to take on these issues. This was often met with equivocation, disregard, and a lack of interest. You have manifestly and repeatedly failed to deliver on every single one of these key policies. Either your distinctive style of government means that you are incapable of doing so, full stop, or, as I must surely conclude now, you never had any intention of keeping your promises. These are not just pet interests of mine. They are what we promised the British people in our 2019 manifesto, which led to a landslide victory. They are what people voted for in the 2016 Brexit referendum. I don't agree. Our deal was no more promise over dinner to be discarded when convenient and denied. Our deal was no mere promise over dinner to be discarded when convenient and denied when challenged. Well, I'm pleased she got fed. I was clear from day one that if you did not wish to leave the ECHR, the way to securely and swiftly deliver our Rwanda partnership would be to block off the ECHR, the HRA, and any other obligations which inhibit our ability to remove those with no right to be in the UK. Our deal expressly referenced notwithstanding clauses to that effect. Well, until she put in legislation, there wasn't the concept of those with no right to be in the UK for people who were coming here as migrants and putting in an application to be refugees. So I question her language here. Your rejection of this path was not merely a betrayal of our agreement, but a betrayal of your promise to the nation that you would do whatever it takes to stop the boats. At every stage of litigation, I cautioned you and your team against assuming we would win. I repeatedly urged you to take legislative measures that would better secure us against the possibility of defeat. You ignored these arguments. You opted instead for wishful thinking as a comfort blanket to avoid having to make hard choices. This irresponsibility has wasted time and left the country in an impossible position. If we lose in the Supreme Court, an outcome that I have consistently argued we must be prepared for, you will have wasted a year and an Act of Parliament only to arrive back at square one. No, I think that's Suella Braverman's problem. Worse than this, your magical thinking, believing that you can will your way through this without upsetting polite opinion, has meant you have failed to prepare any sort of credible plan B. I wrote to you on multiple occasions setting out what a credible plan B would entail, and making clear that unless you pursue these proposals, in the event of defeat, there is no hope of flights this side of an election. I received no reply from you. I can only surmise that this is because you have no appetite for doing what is necessary, and therefore no real intention of fulfilling your pledge to the British people. Rwanda is not the only option for stopping the boats, Suella. You are blinkered and limited in your thought. If, on the other hand, we win in the Supreme Court because of the compromises that you insisted on in the Illegal Migration Act, the government will struggle to deliver our Rwanda partnership in the way that the public expects. The Act is far from secure against legal challenge. People will not be removed as swiftly as I originally proposed. The average claimant will be entitled to months of process, challenge and appeal. Your insistence that Rule 39 indications are binding in international law, against the views of leading lawyers as set out in the House of Lords, will leave us vulnerable to being thwarted yet again by the Strasbourg court. Another cause for disappointment, and the context for my recent article in The Times, has been your failure to rise to the challenge posed by the increasingly vicious anti-Semitism and extremism displayed on our streets since Hamas terrorist atrocities of the 7th of October. I have become hoarse, urging you to consider legislation to ban the hate marches and help stem the rising tide of racism, intimidation, terrorist glorification, threatening community cohesion. But of course, Suella Braverman has added to that, and she's forgetting her own racist rants against Albania and Pakistan. Britain is at a turning point in our history and faces a threat of radicalisation and extremism in a way not seen for 20 years. I regret to say that your response has been uncertain, weak, and lacking in the qualities of leadership that this country needs. Rather than fully acknowledge the severity of this threat, your team disagreed with me for weeks that the law needed changing. As on so many other issues, you sought to put off tough decisions in order to minimise political risk to yourself. In doing so, you have increased the very real risk these marches present to everyone else. In October of last year, you were given the opportunity to lead our country. It is a privilege to serve, and one we should not take for granted. Service requires bravery and thinking of the common good. It is not about occupying the office as an end in itself. Someone needs to be honest. Your plan is not working. We have endured record election defeats. Your resets have failed, and we are running out of time. You need to change course urgently. I may not have always found the right words, but I have always striven to give voice to the quiet majority that supported us in 2019. I have endeavoured to be honest and true to the people who put us in these privileged positions. I will, of course, continue to support the government in pursuit of policies which align with an authentic Conservative agenda. Sincerely, Suella Braverman. So that strongly suggests that if Rishi Sunak changes course, changes action, and doesn't follow her directives, that she will send a letter to the 1922 committee. I think he should say, publish and be damned. What a detestable individual. And, among other things, what a foul and obnoxious loser. There is something that in public office which requires accepting with grace a reward and rejection, dismissal and elevation. In the end, all politicians' careers end in failure. Hers has been slightly quicker, but I think hers should be a steep and immediate spiral into election defeat, her own as soon as possible. She should resign from Parliament. That is not the letter that you send to the Prime Minister. It is certainly not a letter that you publish.